There are very few characters in World of Warcraft who divide the community the way Sylvanas Windrunner does. For some players, she is a monster, a war criminal, a tyrant, a character who burned an entire world tree and laughed while doing it. For others, she is one of the most tragic figures Blizzard has ever written, a victim of forces far beyond her control, shaped by death, betrayal, and fear. And that's what makes Sylvanas so fascinating. Because her story isn't simple. It's not a clean hero's journey, and it's definitely not a classic villain arc. Sylvanas Windrunner is a story about loss, about agency, and about what happens when someone who has already lost everything decides they will never be powerless again. Before she was the Banshee Queen, before she was War Chief, before her name inspired fear across Azeroth, Sylvanas was a defender, a Ranger General of Silvermoon, a protector of her people, someone who stood on the front lines when the Scourge came, fully aware that she might die, and willing to do so if it meant buying her homeland even a few more moments of survival. But what happened to her was worse than death. Her soul was torn apart, her will was stolen, and she was forced to serve the very monster who destroyed everything she loved. That moment, more than any other, is the foundation of everything Sylvanas becomes. Every ruthless decision, every cold command, every time she chooses control over compassion. And yet, for all the horrors she commits later in her story, one question always lingers in the background. How much of Sylvanas was truly her choice? Was she a villain who used tragedy as an excuse? Or was she a broken soul fighting against a universe that never stopped taking from her? In this video, we're going to walk through Sylvanas Windrunner's story step by step, from her life before death, to her transformation into the Banshee Queen, to the controversial choices that reshaped Azeroth itself. Not to excuse her actions, not to condemn her outright, but to understand her. Because Sylvanas isn't just a character in World of Warcraft, she's a mirror, reflecting what happens when trauma, fear, and power collide. And by the end of this video, you might not agree with her. But you'll understand why she did what she did. Before the name Sylvanas Windrunner inspired fear, before it was whispered with hatred, grief, or anger. It was spoken with respect. Long before the Scourge ever reached the gates of Quel'Thalas, Sylvanas Windrunner was known as the Ranger General of Silvermoon, the highest military rank among the High Elven Rangers. This was not a ceremonial title. Sylvanas earned her position through discipline, sharp instincts, and an unshakable sense of duty. She was a commander who understood terrain, timing, and sacrifice, someone who led from the front, not from behind gilded walls. Silvermoon City, at the height of its power, was a place of beauty and arrogance. The High Elves believed their magical defenses, their enchanted spires, and their ancient runestones made them untouchable. Sylvanas did not share that complacency. She knew borders could fall, she knew enemies adapted, and she knew that when war came, it would not be glorious. As Ranger General, her responsibility was simple and absolute: protect Quel'Thalas at any cost. Her rangers patrolled the forests endlessly. They mapped invasion routes. They trained for ambushes, retreats, and last stands. Sylvanas believed that preparation was the difference between survival and extinction. And that belief would soon be tested when rumours of the undead Scourge began spreading across Lordaeron. Many dismissed them as exaggerations, stories of plague victims and scattered necromancers. Sylvanas did not. She listened, she prepared, she fortified the borders. But even she could not fully grasp what was coming. The Scourge was not just an army. It was an unstoppable force driven by a singular purpose: reach the Sunwell. And Sylvanas was the final barrier standing in its way. When the undead finally marched on Quel'Thalas, Sylvanas didn't retreat to Silvermoon. She didn't wait for orders. She moved immediately to slow them down, ordering strategic withdrawals, collapsing pathways, and using the forests themselves as weapons. Her goal was never victory. It was time. Every minute the Scourge was delayed meant more civilians evacuated. Every skirmish brought another breath for her people. She knew she was outmatched. And she stayed anyway. This is an important part of Sylvanas' story that often gets forgotten. She chose to stand her ground. Not because she believed she would win, but because someone had to stand between annihilation and her homeland. In those moments, Sylvanas Windrunner embodied everything the High Elves valued: duty, pride, and sacrifice. And then inevitably, the line broke. Despite her tactics, despite her resistance, the Scourge pushed forward. One defense after another fell. Silvermoon itself lay exposed. When Sylvanas finally confronted the leader of the invasion, she did so knowing the outcome was almost certain. She fought anyway. Not for glory, not for legend, but because as Ranger General, it was her responsibility to be the last line of defense. Her death did not come quickly, and it did not come cleanly. But that moment, the fall of Sylvanas Windrunner, was not a failure. It was the final act of a commander who never abandoned her people. And tragically, it was only the beginning of her suffering. When the Scourge finally broke through the defences of Quel'Thalas, it wasn't led by a mindless monster or a faceless general. It was led by Arthas Menethil, a fallen prince whose crusade had already destroyed Lord Daeron, betrayed his own people, and reshaped the fate of Azeroth. For Sylvanas, this was not just another enemy commander. This was the embodiment of everything she had been fighting to stop. Arthas did not rush towards Silvermoon. He advanced methodically, corrupting the land as he went, raising fallen elves into undeath and turning defenders into weapons against their own people. Every step forward was psychological warfare. Sylvanas harried his forces relentlessly. Ambushes in the forest, scorched pathways, traps meant to slow and bleed the Scourge. She understood that she could not defeat Arthas outright, but she could delay him. And delay him she did. Again and again, she forced Arthas to reroute, to reinforce, to adapt. Each delay frustrated him. Each delay cost him time. And each delay cost the High Elves lives, but fewer than would have died had she done nothing. Eventually, Arthas grew tired of the resistance. He confronted Sylvanas personally. Their encounter was not a clash of equals. Arthas was already wielding Frostmourne, a blade that devoured souls. Sylvanas fought with everything she had: speed, precision, desperation. It wasn't enough. Arthas struck her down, but killing Sylvanas Windrunner was not sufficient for him. In one of the most disturbing acts in Warcraft lore, Arthas chose cruelty over mercy. Instead of allowing her soul to pass on, he tore it from her body, ripping her spirit from any hope of peace, and bound it into undeath. Sylvanas was raised as a banshee, not simply undead, but conscious, aware, trapped inside a screaming spectral form, stripped of her body, her dignity, and her will. Arthas forced her to serve the Scourge, commanding her to hunt down survivors, slaughter her own people, and aid in the complete destruction of Silvermoon. This is a crucial moment to understand. Sylvanas was not corrupted by power. She was not tempted. She was enslaved. Her suffering did not end with death. It began there. As a banshee, Sylvanas retained her memories. She remembered who she was. She remembered her sisters. She remembered the city she had sworn to protect. And she was forced to help destroy it. Silvermoon burned. The Sunwell was defiled. Quel'Thalas fell. And Sylvanas, bound to Arthas's will, was made to witness it all. This experience shattered her sense of identity. To be killed is one thing. To be violated, enslaved, and weaponized against everything you love is another entirely. From this moment on, Sylvanas' understanding of the universe changed. Life did not protect the innocent. Honor did not save the loyal. And mercy did not exist. Only power did, only control. Arthas eventually moved on, leaving Sylvanas behind, a broken spirit chained to the Scourge, yet still aware, still thinking, still hating. And that hatred burned hotter than anything she had ever known in life. Hatred for Arthas, hatred for the Scourge, and hatred for a world that allowed this to happen. This was not just the death of Sylvanas Windrunner. This was the birth of the Banshee Queen, a soul forged not in ambition, but in agony. And though she did not yet know it, the moment Arthas turned his back on her would eventually become the moment everything changed. Because enslavement creates one overwhelming desire, not justice, not redemption, but freedom. And Sylvanas would one day pay any price to claim it. Sylvanas did not break free from the Lich King all at once. Her freedom came slowly, painfully, like a crack spreading through ice. When the Lich King's power weakened during his campaign in Northrend, his control over many undead faltered. For most, it meant confusion. For Sylvanas, it meant clarity. For the first time since her death, the voice commanding her every action went silent. And in that silence, something terrifying returned. Her will. Sylvanas Windrunner remembered who she was. She remembered what had been taken from her. And most importantly, she remembered who was responsible. Her first emotion was not hope. It was rage. Sylvanas immediately turned that rage into purpose. She gathered other undead who had also broken free. Former soldiers, civilians, elves, humans, all abandoned by the living and discarded by the Scourge. They were lost, they were hated, and they had nowhere to go. Sylvanas gave them something no one else would. A banner. These undead would become known as the Forsaken, not because they chose the name, but because it was true. The living races of Azeroth wanted nothing to do with them. To the world, they were monsters. To Sylvanas, they were survivors. But Sylvanas did not lead with kindness. She led with certainty. She promised the Forsaken 3 things: freedom from the Lich King, revenge against Arthas, and a future where they would never be helpless again. This wasn't idealism, it was survival. Sylvanas understood something fundamental about undeath. Fear does not disappear. It evolves. The Forsaken feared oblivion, rejection, and being enslaved again. Sylvanas shared those fears, and she molded her people around preventing them at any cost. Their first true act as a faction was vengeance. Sylvanas hunted down dreadlords, servants of the Burning Legion left behind after the Scourge fractured. One by one, she eliminated them, reclaiming the ruined city beneath Lordaeron. That city would become Undercity, and there, beneath the ruins of a fallen kingdom, Sylvanas Windrunner took her throne. But make no mistake, Thinamwal, this was never about ruling. It was about control. Control over her fate. Control over her people's survival. Control over death itself, if possible. Sylvanas knew the Forsaken could not stand alone. The living would never trust them, but the Horde might use them. So she made a calculated choice. The Forsaken joined the Horde, not out of loyalty, not out of honor, but because alliances are weapons. And Sylvanas always planned ahead. While the world saw the Forsaken as grotesque allies, Sylvanas saw opportunity. The Horde provided protection. The Forsaken provided resources, plague research, and intelligence. And Sylvanas provided leadership without mercy. Her obsession with Arthas never faded. Every experiment, every weapon, every sacrifice. All of it served one goal: kill the Lich King. But vengeance came at a cost. The more Sylvanas pursued control, the further she drifted from the ideals she once embodied. The Ranger General who fought to protect civilians became a queen willing to sacrifice anything for long-term survival, including morality. This is where Sylvanas begins to change in a way that makes players uncomfortable. She was no longer reacting to trauma. She was shaping the world to ensure it could never hurt her again. And yet, despite everything, she never abandoned the Forsaken. She did not seek godhood. She did not seek conquest. She sought certainty in a universe that had proven nothing was permanent. When the call finally came to march on Icecrown Citadel, Sylvanas believed her purpose was within reach. Arthas would fall. Her tormentor would die. And for a brief moment, he did. But vengeance did not bring peace. It brought something far worse. Emptiness. Because when Arthas died, Sylvanas was forced to confront a truth she had been running from since the moment she broke free. Her entire existence had been built around a single enemy, and now he was gone. Which left her with only one question. What happens to a soul forged entirely by hatred when the object of that hatred disappears? The answer would change Sylvanas Windrunner forever, and it would push her down a path far darker than vengeance. With Arthas defeated, something unexpected happened. Sylvanas Windrunner did not feel victory. There was no relief, no closure, no sense that the universe had finally balanced itself. Instead, there was silence. For years, Sylvanas had defined herself by opposition, by hatred, by revenge, by the certainty that as long as Arthas existed, her purpose was clear. When he fell, that clarity vanished, and in its place came a terrifying realization. She had survived vengeance, but she had no idea how to live after it. As ruler of the Forsaken, Sylvanas Windrunner now faced a different kind of threat. Not an external enemy, but inevitability. Undeath was not eternal. Forsaken bodies decayed. They could not reproduce naturally. Every loss was permanent. Sylvanas understood this better than anyone. Without new Forsaken, her people would slowly disappear. And extinction to Sylvanas was just another form of enslavement. This is where her leadership began to harden into something colder, something many players would later call monstrous. To Sylvanas, morality had always been a luxury of the living. The Forsaken did not have that luxury. She authorized the use of the Blight, a weapon capable of killing both living and undead. Not because she enjoyed suffering, but because it worked. It leveled the battlefield. It ensured survival in a world that would gladly wipe her people out. Where other leaders hesitated, Sylvanas acted. Where others debated ethics, she measured outcomes. And slowly, the gap between her and the rest of the Horde began to widen. To leaders like Thrall and later Vol'jin, the Horde was bound by honor. To Sylvanas, honor was a story people told themselves to sleep at night. What mattered was control over territory, control over resources, control over death itself, if possible. This philosophy made her effective, terrifyingly so, but also isolated. Even among her allies, trust eroded. Sylvanas didn't deny what she was doing. She simply believed everyone else was lying about their own hands being clean. From her perspective, the living committed atrocities with smiles and banners. She did it openly, without apology. And yet, despite her ruthlessness, one truth remained constant. Sylvanas never stopped seeing the Forsaken as her responsibility. She did not abandon them. She did not elevate herself above them as a god. She stayed among them, ruled from Undercity, surrounded by decay, fully embracing what she had become. But then came another fracture. When Vol'jin named Sylvanas as war chief of the Horde, it shocked everyone, including Sylvanas herself. Power on that scale had never been her goal, but once again, she adapted. As war chief, Sylvanas' worldview expanded. The survival of the Forsaken was no longer enough. The Horde itself became a shield, and shields must be reinforced, even if it means striking first. This marked a turning point. Sylvanas began to see the entire world through the same lens she had once reserved for her people. A hostile system that punished weakness and rewarded control. And if the system was unjust, then it deserved to be broken. This belief would eventually culminate in the burning of Teldrassil, an act that shattered any remaining illusion that Sylvanas was merely a morally grey survivor. To many, this was the moment she crossed the line. To Sylvanas, it was escalation, not cruelty for its own sake, but terror as a tool. Because fear, she believed, could end wars faster than honor ever could. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Sylvanas was not wrong about the world. Azeroth is brutal. Power does decide survival. And mercy often gets people killed. What made Sylvanas different was not that she embraced these truths. It was that she refused to look away from their consequences. She accepted becoming the villain if it meant never being a victim again. And that choice cost her everything else. Trust, legacy, even the loyalty of those who once followed her without question. By the time the Horde turned against her, Sylvanas was already alone, standing at the top of a structure built on fear, necessity, and unresolved trauma. She had gained control over armies, but lost control over herself. Because beneath the armor, beneath the titles, beneath the power, Sylvanas Windrunner was still running from the same fear that had haunted her since Icecrown. The fear that death was not an ending, but a cage, and the lengths she would go to escape it were about to reshape the fate of the entire cosmos. The end of Arthas should have been the end of Sylvanas' nightmare. For years she had lived for that single moment, the fall of the Lich King, the death of the one who had enslaved her soul and destroyed her people. When Arthas finally lay defeated at Icecrown's citadel, the world celebrated. Sylvanas did not, because for her, vengeance was never the destination. It was a distraction. Shortly after Arthas's death, Sylvanas Windrunner climbed to the highest peak of Icecrown's citadel alone. No guards, no followers, no speeches, only silence. And there, standing at the edge of the frozen throne, she made a decision that shocked even those closest to her. She threw herself from the spire. This moment is often misunderstood. This was not despair in the way mortals understand it. Sylvanas was not grieving Arthas. She was not broken by regret. She was done. Her purpose had been fulfilled, and she believed there was nothing left. No future, no peace, no place for her in a world that despised what she was. So she let go. But death did not bring rest. Instead, Sylvanas fell into something far worse. She experienced a void beyond pain, a cold, endless darkness where no voices answered, where no memories comforted, where existence itself felt like punishment. There was no reunion, no judgment, no meaning, only oblivion. And that terrified her. This was the true turning point of Sylvanas' story. Not the burning of a city, not the use of forbidden weapons, not the betrayal of allies. It was the realization that death itself was a prison. She was saved only because the Valkyr intervened. Ancient beings bound to the power of death, who struck a bargain with her. They restored her to undeath, but at a cost. Sylvanas was shown her fate, and she rejected it completely. From that moment on, Sylvanas no longer feared enemies, armies, or even the judgment of the living. She feared what came after. And fear, when combined with power and intelligence, is one of the most dangerous forces in the universe. Sylvanas returned to the Forsaken changed. Not visibly, she was always cold. Always distant, but fundamentally. Where once she sought survival and revenge, she now sought escape. Escape from oblivion. Escape from meaninglessness. Escape from a system that condemned souls without explanation. Her obsession with control deepened. The Valkyr became essential to her plans. They allowed the creation of new Forsaken, something she had previously believed impossible. But every resurrection required a sacrifice. Sylvanas accepted that price. To her, a few deaths now were preferable to eternal damnation later. This is where her worldview fully crystallized. Life was temporary. Death was eternal. And the universe was cruel enough to demand obedience to that structure. Sylvanas refused. She no longer fought to protect her people alone. She fought against the very mechanics of existence. And this is why her later actions cannot be understood as simple cruelty or ambition. They were driven by terror. Not of pain, but of insignificance. To Sylvanas, oblivion was worse than tyranny, worse than war, worse than becoming a monster. At least monsters exist. This fear explains her willingness to push boundaries others wouldn't touch, to sacrifice allies, to provoke wars, to gamble with entire populations. Because if the system of life and death was broken, then burning it down was not evil, it was necessary. By the end of this chapter in her story, Sylvanas Windrunner was no longer merely reacting to trauma. She was planning, watching, waiting, and searching for a way to shatter the fate that awaited her, and everyone else. The question was no longer whether Sylvanas would cross another line. It was how far she would go, and how many worlds would burn before she finally felt free. By the time Sylvanas Windrunner stepped fully into the events that would lead to Shadowlands, she was no longer fighting nations, factions, or even ideals. She was fighting fate. Everything she had learned since Icecrown pointed to the same conclusion. The universe was governed by an unseen system that sorted souls, stripped them of choice, and condemned them to eternity without consent. And Sylvanas had seen where she was meant to end up. That knowledge hardened her resolve. Somewhere in the machinery of death, she encountered a presence unlike any other, the jailer, the ruler of the Maw, a being imprisoned, erased from history, and cast as irredeemable by the very system that governed all souls. To Sylvanas, this was not coincidence. It was confirmation. The jailer spoke of a broken cycle, of a cosmic order built on lies, of souls used as fuel, not judged with fairness, and, most importantly, he spoke of choice. Where others saw a tyrant, Sylvanas saw something familiar, a figure condemned by a system that allowed no appeal, no mercy, and no escape. For the first time since her death, Sylvanas believed she was not alone in her understanding of the universe. She aligned herself with the jailer not out of loyalty, but alignment of purpose. Together they would break the system of death entirely. This alliance reframes everything Sylvanas does next. The burning of Teldrassil was not random cruelty. The war against the Alliance was not blind hatred. The flood of souls into the Maw was not collateral damage. It was fuel. Sylvanas believed that only by overwhelming the system could it be destroyed. That suffering now could prevent eternal suffering later. And once again, she chose the path where she decided the cost. Her final severance from the Horde came when she openly rejected the idea that honor, loyalty, or faction even mattered anymore. "You are all nothing," she declared, not out of arrogance, but disillusionment. In her eyes, everyone was already enslaved. The true symbol of this rebellion came at Icecrown Citadel when Sylvanas confronted Bolvar Fordragon, the new Lich King. The helm of domination, once the ultimate symbol of control, was not claimed. It was shattered. With that single act, Sylvanas tore open the veil between life and death, unleashing the Shadowlands upon Azeroth and forcing the truth of the afterlife into the open. This was not conquest. It was exposure. She wanted the universe to see what awaited them. But the deeper she went into the Shadowlands, the more cracks began to form in her certainty. The jailer's vision of freedom came at a staggering cost. Entire realms were broken. Countless souls were tortured endlessly. And the choice Sylvanas believed she was fighting for seemed increasingly one-sided. When confronted with the full scope of what the Maw truly was, Sylvanas hesitated, something she had not done in years. And that hesitation mattered, because for the first time since Icecrown, Sylvanas was forced to face a terrifying possibility. What if she was wrong? What if the system was flawed? But breaking it meant becoming something far worse than its jailer. When her soul, long fractured since Arthas's betrayal, and was finally restored, the weight of every action crashed down on her at once. No justifications, no distancing, no armor, just truth. Sylvanas had not been fighting for choice. She had been fighting against fear, and fear had led her to trust another master while believing herself free. The war against death itself ended not with triumph, but with reckoning. Sylvanas Windrunner stood at the center of a shattered cosmic order, forced to finally answer the question she had avoided her entire unlife. If freedom requires endless suffering, Is it still freedom? And for the first time since her soul was torn from her body, Sylvanas had no enemy left to blame but herself